1. In this week's Tableau Tip Tuesday, I'm going to show you how to create an evenly distributed butterfly chart. Now, a butterfly chart is basically a bar chart that has two different things you're going to try to compare. One goes to the left and one goes to the right. So for example, it could be number of females on the left, number of males on the right. But what we want to do is we want to have them evenly distributed on each side. Therefore, when you compare them with a zero line, like you see in the view on the screen, you can see which way that leans. So we're going to go through two examples. The first one we're going to look at is with US electoral votes. So I'm going to start by putting the state on the rows. I'm going to put the Democrats on the columns. And if I put Republican on top of the axis to make it a combined axis, you'll see that they both go the same direction. But I want them to go opposite directions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second calculated field. I'm just going to call it Dem minus. And it's simply just going to be the minus of the Dem field. And hit OK. And now when I put that one on the view instead, you'll see they start going opposite directions. From here, I'm going to take measure names and move that to the color shelf. I'm going to go ahead and edit my colors. So the Democrats are usually blue and the Republicans are usually red. So let's just do something simple like that. But now what I want to be able to do is I'm going to make it a bit more obvious by putting a constant line on 0. And I'm going to format that reference line. Okay, so let me try to format that reference line. Let me just go here, and then I want to go to my reference line. I'm going to make it thick and black and nice and bold like that. Okay, I do want to get rid of that 0 value, so let me edit the reference line, and I want to get rid of the label and get rid of the tooltip. So we just have this nice solid 0 line. But what I want to be able to do is show the lean one way or the other. So for example, if you look at the axis now, the Democrat goes to -1 and the Republican goes to about 65% or 70%. Okay, so how can we clean that up? Or how can we make them evenly distributed? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to get the maximum of each value. I'm going to add Democrat to the detail just so I have it for reference. So you can see when I hover over, I'll just go ahead and put them all in here, including the margin. So we can see the Democrat, the Republicans, and the margin. All right, so what I want to do is I want to create a new calculated field, and I'm going to call it my max. I'll just call it my max. That's okay. And I want to get the window max of the sum of the Dem. And then what I want to do is I want to compare that to something like the window max of the sum of the Republicans. Okay, now I need to compare these two values. So I'm going to say if the Democrat is greater than or equal to the Democrat, then I want to get the window max of the sum of the Democrat. Okay, let me move this down to a second line. Otherwise, I want to use the window max of the sum of the Republican. And end. All right, so what does this look like now? I'm going to go ahead and take my max field and put it on the detail shelf. And I'm going to edit my table calc, and I want to make sure I go down the table. Okay, that's good. And when I hover over, you can see I've got my window max. My max along state is 0.92, no matter where I hover over. Okay? And that's going to give me my reference line for the positive side of the view. So if I go ahead and I add a reference line, and I put that as my max, you can see that value is always going to be out to the right-hand side. So I'm going to set it to none, set the tooltip to none. And I'll go ahead and leave the line on there for now so we can see what it's doing. So I've got that out there, but I also want that number to be on the left-hand side. So to do that, all I'm going to do is create a second calculated field, and I'm just going to call it max minus. And it's simply going to be the minus of my maximum table calc. Let's put that onto the detail shelf. Make sure it's computing by state. And now I'm going to put on a second reference line. So this time it's going to be based on my max minus field, no label, no tooltip, and untick the recalculate. And now you can see I have the same line on both sides, just one on the negative side and one on the positive side. So now that I have those, I can format them, and I can get rid of the line, and I can get rid of the line. All right, and now we have an evenly distributed butterfly chart. Now to clean this up a bit, I'm going to get rid of in my dem minus tool, I'm going to uncheck include in tooltip. But notice here that my scale is negative. So I'm going to go ahead and format my dem minus field. And I'm going to go to the axis, and I'm going to set that to a percentage to 0 decimals. And you see it still says, oh, sorry, I formatted the wrong field there. I want to format my measure values field. And I want to set it to a percentage of 0 decimals, but I still have the minus down here at the bottom. So I'm going to go to custom, and I'm going to have 0% and then a semicolon to format my negatives. So that's going to be 0% as well. And now it looks like it's positive on both sides. All right, the last thing I'm going to do, it looks like I also need to format my margin. So default properties, number format, and I'll set that to a percentage to 1 decimal. And now we can see the Democrats, the Republicans. So let's go ahead and let's clean up our tooltips then. So let's make the Democrat and Republican also 1 decimal. And in my tooltip, I can now say I've got the state. I want to have the Democrat, the Republican, and the margin. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now you can see how the difference is between each of these. Okay, so that's one option. So that's my electoral votes. And yeah, so I would probably just leave it like that for now. You can also sort it if you want. So for example, if I want to sort my states by, let's say I want to do it by the field, descending by, let's say, the Democratic votes. Okay, and then you can see how far it leans left to right. So if I set entire view, you can see a bit better now how the states lean. I could also do the same thing for the Republicans, or I could make it alphabetical. All right. So the next thing I would do then is I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same thing, but with the Makeover Monday data set from this week. Oh, sorry, not from the, from the Makeover Monday data set this week, or 2 weeks ago, which is the US GDP versus the debt. So I'm going to go ahead and put my debt on the columns, and my GDP, again, as a dual axis. Take measure names and put that on to the color shelf. And now we've got, but right now they're stacked on top of each other. So I need to move one of them to the left-hand side. So I'm going to create a new calculated field, and I'm going to call it debt minus. And again, it's just going to be the minus of my debt. Let's put that onto the measure names instead. And now you see it goes to the left-hand side. All right, I've got a quarter field, so I'm just going to right click and drag that to the rows. And I'm going to look at my each quarter. So let's set that to fit entire view. And you can see we've got this this chart that goes kind of funky out left to right. And I need to, again, so you see the scale on the right hand side goes to 24 trillion, and the one on the left hand side goes to minus 28 trillion. All right, let's format our measure values again. Let's set that to a custom number. So I'm going to set it to 0 decimals and billions, but I want it to actually be in trillions. So now I'm going to go to my custom number format. I'm going to add in another comma and change this to T. Add in another comma and replace the B with a T. But I also don't want the negative sign to show up, so I'm going to remove that. Okay. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and change this mark type to a bar. And we see we got them going left to right. And again, to do our to make sure the axes are the same, I'm going to create a new calculated field. So this time, let's do it with a reference band instead of 2 reference lines. So I'm going to call this one again my max. I'm going to say if the window max of the sum of GDP or debt is greater than or equal to the window max of the sum of the GDP, then I want to bring back the window max of my sum of GDP. Else, I want to bring back the window max of the sum of my GDP. Okay, that's my max. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And, oh, I didn't really need to do that. I just want to do max minus, so I could just say minus my max field. Okay, let's put both of those onto the detail shelf. And we want to compute them both using quarter. All right, so now if I hover over these values, you can see I've got 26.4 trillion, which is this bar over here, which is our debt. Okay, and right, so now this time let's go ahead and add a reference band. So I'm going to go to my analytics pane. I'm going to drag on a reference band for the table. My minimum value is going to be my max minus. My maximum value is going to be my max. And you can see now it's shading in the minimum and the maximum values. So I'm going to turn off the labels and the tooltips. Oops. And I'm going to also turn off the shading and turn off the recalculate. Okay, now I also like to put a constant line on 0 because I want to see that down the center. So I'm going to edit my reference line for 0. And I'm going to say no value, no tooltip. Let's make it maybe a thicker black line. Okay, there we go. And so when I think of debt, I think of red. So I'm going to edit my colors. And when I think of debt, I think of red. When I think of GDP, I think of something a bit more more positive. So we don't want to use red and green. So I'll just again, I guess I'll just use blue. That's fine. And now we can see the difference between the two. Now in my Makeover Monday, what I did was I made this quarter field continuous instead of discrete, and it flipped it up the other direction. So this means that the most recent quarters are at the top. So whichever way you prefer to do it. Again, from here we need to format. We can go ahead and let's edit our axis, and I'm going to get rid of the title. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and hide the header for the quarter. Let's see, what else do we need to do here? We need to clean up our tooltip. So I know I don't want my max or my min in the tooltip. I don't want my debt minus in the tooltip, but I do want my debt in the tooltip. Okay, so now when we hover over, we see the quarter and the debt. And the, sorry, let's see, what field is missing here? Oh, I also want to put the GDP on detail. That way I get them both at the same time. Edit my tooltip, get rid of the measure of values section. Maybe I'll make my quarter nice and big. Okay. And now I can see my debt and my GDP, and no matter which side I go on. But you see we have a perfectly sized axis now on both sides. Last thing I would do is get rid of my grid lines. So I'm going to turn them on and back off. Get rid of my 0 line and get rid of my axis rulers. And there we go. So now we have both of those next to each other. Now, if you wanted to have the header at the top as well to make it a bit easier to read, I'm just going to go into my column shelf, and I'm just going to put in the average of 0. Now on this shelf, I don't need any of these fields, so I'm just going to get rid of all of them. Okay, and I can leave the mark type as a bar. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to make this a dual axis, and then I'm going to synchronize. And you can see we now have the values at the top. I can format my average of 0. So again, I'm going to make that trillions. So I need to go to number custom, 0 decimals, make it billions. Let's actually make it, 0 decimals. Go to my custom, add a comma in and change the B to a T. And then add a comma in and change the B to a T and remove the minus sign. All right. I'm going to edit my axis now and get rid of my average of 0. And we can either leave both axes there. If we want to kind of hide the bottom one, what I would do is I would format the axis, or no, go to edit axis. And on the tick marks, I'm just going to say none. Okay, you can't hide it because otherwise it hides the top axis as well. Lastly, I'm going to go to my borders and get rid of my row divider and get rid of my column divider. So now we have these nice lines going down from the, or I'm sorry, the nice little labels at the top, which might make it a bit easier for you to read. If we want to format it so it's every 5 trillion, again, I can edit the axis, go to tick marks, and I want to do it fixed, and I want it to do every, I wonder if I can just type in 5t, yeah, every 5 trillion. And okay, and maybe we want to put our grid lines back on then. So let's do our let's see, so that would be our column grid lines. Let's turn those back on, and now at least you can see, maybe see those lines for a bit more context. Okay, so 2 examples again. We've got the electoral votes, we have the GDP versus the debt. Both of them are now equally distributed or evenly distributed butterfly charts. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, be sure to subscribe and get notifications for any future tips. All right, have a great day.